Welcome to Trinity Radio. You found the channel that loves atheists, but we also love other Christians, and today I am excited to introduce you to, some of you have already met this person, but someone who really means a lot to me, one of my personal heroes, and I'll introduce him to you in just a moment, let you hear from him. But my pastor is here with us today, and my pastor means a lot to me because when I came to the city that I live in now, Evansville, Indiana, I was looking for a church that was right for me, and there are fewer options than there were in Nashville. But I found a church that was more appropriate for me and my family, I think, than anything that I could have designed for myself. And that has a lot to do with the vision that God placed on Pastor Bret's heart. And I'm just so excited for you to meet him. And so I want to introduce you right now to my pastor, Bret Nicholson. Bret, thanks so much for being here today.
Well, you're very welcome. It's hard to know how to follow an introduction like that, though. Like, well, thank you very much.
Yeah, be your typical awesome self.
Typical awesome self.
Yeah.
See that we need more people like that in our church that really think that way. That's great. Great stuff.
Yeah, and so I'm excited that you're here, Bret. And but right now first, let me just say. We're going to talk about a sensitive subject in just a few minutes, and I think it's going to be really good and beneficial. But Pastor Bret's church is a different kind of church in one sense. It is a church that is pushing really hard to have a voice in the online community in a way that is not typical of churches anymore, and really be a church for those that don't have a church until they find a local church. And apologetics is a big part of that. And I want you to go check out their resources and stuff. And you can do that by going to YouTube and searching for the One Life Network. The One Life Network, you'll see it there with a big red circle with what looks like an L, or it looks like a clock in it. That's like the One Life logo. And go check that out and listen to these videos, listen to these sermons. But Bret, you're doing other things. Tell us a little bit about One Life Network.
Yeah, I think the main thing we're doing, especially in the YouTube space now, is we're like a lot of churches, we post things on YouTube, but recently we started contextualizing more to YouTube itself and creating content that kind of fits that platform a little, and so we're experimenting with that and doing some shorts and that kind of thing. And then we originally called ourselves a network because we are multi-site, and we were planning on planting a number of churches. We still are, but we've adjusted our sales a little bit to reach into the social media space kind of thing. So,
yeah. Well, that's awesome. Well, go check that channel out and check out the website. But when you go to the YouTube channel, since this is a YouTube video right here, listen, watch a couple of videos, and I guarantee you that unless you just have terrible taste in preachers, you're going to love Pastor Bret. And even if you're a skeptic, I've said one time in a video that you're the pastor for skeptics. So if you're a skeptic, check it out, man. And if you like what you see, subscribe to the channel, and that's going to be really great.
And if you don't like it, you obviously have terrible taste in preachers.
That's right.
That's a great
demonstrate
way to
your good taste in preachers by subscribing today. Oh man, so that's awesome. Well, let's jump into this, Bret, because right now there is a controversy of sorts. News, I don't know, controversy maybe not the right word, I don't know. But Matt Chandler, well-known pastor, has a multi-site church. What's the name of his church?
The Village Church.
The Village Church,
down in Texas,
yeah. And it's a multi-site church, and you pastor a multi-site church. And there are differences in those churches, but in terms of the look and all those kind of things, there are some similarities. And so I thought it would be really helpful to get your take on something that's happening right now with him. And in fact, maybe you can explain a bit more, but simply put, Matt Chandler has stepped back, I think at least we can say, because of an event that has happened in his life where he had a conversation, number of conversations, kind of a text-based friendship with a woman in his, or maybe not in the church. Maybe I should let you be telling this, but with a woman, and it was not sexual, it was not romantic, so far as we know and so far as they say. But both spouses and both spouses knew about this. But this has something related to this has led to the point now where the leadership at that church, including Matt, have said, maybe you should step back, maybe I should step back. What else is there that's important to this story?
Yeah, that kind of that sums it up pretty well. I think I think the thing that I was anxious to discuss, and the reason we're even doing this, is because especially when it first happened, it's like, oh boy, here it goes again. There's been a lot of very prominent pastors that have fallen into these kinds of things, and it looked like he was going to be another. When you listen closer, that's the big debate right now. Is have they nipped it in the bud? Which it sounds like they might have, because it wasn't sexual. I was impressed by the fact that he said his wife knew about this, her husband knew about this. But at the same time, he did note that there were inappropriate things. And sometimes when you say that word, you can fill in a lot of blanks. And I think people are. And I get it, because I'm a little bit this way too after so many scandals I've watched, is that we're waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like, okay, what's inappropriate really mean? Are these, and there might be like a time where these texts are revealed for what they said, and they'll be made public, and we'll see inappropriate did mean sexual or somehow. And I think everybody's waiting for that. But my biggest, I guess my compassion move was, even if it ends up being nothing and they did nip something in the bud, like he kind of says they were, it still raises all those emotions of, oh boy, pastors, come on, give me a break.
Yeah, what's wrong with pastors?
What's wrong with pastors? Are you people, can't you get your act together? You're the ones that are supposed to be guiding people to have their act together. So yeah. I get it. And so there was, I felt like, I know people in my own congregation. I have not been a big Matt Chandler follower, but I know people who have been. They're very impressed by him, and he put a lot in their lives. But I know people in my own congregation will struggle and wrestle with that same old thing of, how do I cope with this, and why should I believe something that is filled with all these guys failing all the time, is kind of what it comes down to.
Brett, I'll tell you, when you look at it, first of all, let me just say, there is very much that notion, and we operate on this channel in the worldview community, and just trust me, and as well as I do, there are a lot of people that love to talk negatively about pastors out there, and it's just
no offense taken, by the way.
Right, it's just become a trope. But the reality is, I've known a lot of pastors. I don't know many people who've known more pastors than me, because for 15 years, I was traveling and speaking in churches, different church every week. And the vast majority of those pastors, and maybe they're all good pastors because they're the type that would have me come preach, but those pastors were all good, for the most part, were good guys. There were a couple of guys in the bunch that I worked with that I don't know that they were in it for the best reasons, or there was evidence of that. But really, the bad names that are out there, there are crummy people in every profession. There are maybe I shouldn't say crummy people that do crummy things, that are police and judges and supermarket attendants and all kinds of things. And you're going to find that in the church among pastors as well. But I can say one thing for sure, as I have submitted to your leadership and guidance, and in fact, on things that are pretty private at times with you, I can say to anyone, if anyone's looking for a church and you live within 100 miles of Evansville, this pastor has been a man of integrity for me, and I appreciate that. But pastors do get a bad rap. And I wanted to say something about this, though, because you kind of pointed this out. The charitable take is, wow, there wasn't even anything sexual or romantic. And we hear people all the time saying that men and women in the church should be able to have friendships that are cautious friendships. So the charitable take is, wow, this church and this guy are just really sensitive to the Spirit, and don't want to and want to take every precaution to, as you said, nip it in the bud. On the other hand, the uncharitable reading of this, and I don't want to say that it's wrong if this comes into your mind. It comes into all our minds because, like you say, we've seen this so much, is, okay, there's something else going on under the hood, and this is a way to dodge that or hope nobody goes there or whatever about that. How do you navigate something like that, Pastor? What if I was in your church, which I am, but let's say I became a Christian, and it was Matt Chandler's ministry was a big part of that, and I came to you and said, I'm really messed up about this, Pastor, because Matt Chandler really meant a lot to me. He's kind of like a hero in the faith. Everything's kind of thrown into question, like you said.
Sure, and some of that, it is deserved. I mean, the Bible does say those who teach should be judged more strictly, and the more I've taught, the more I understand that is a really big deal. Mm-hmm. And so the very first thing, and we did a message on this about this time last year, and so I delved into it pretty deep because I was personally deeply hurt by the Ravi Zacharias thing and coming out of that. Mm-hmm. But so my first coaching is compassion, that if you have that happen to you, because I've seen it happen very publicly, but I've also had that happen in my own life, privately with good friends of mine. One mentor of mine that I looked up to majorly fell in that way. And so all the hurt that goes through that, the disillusionment, the first thing you just have to say is, I get it. I understand. That is extremely disappointing and frustrating, because while, like you said, there are people in every profession that do all these, that mess up morally and all these things. Well, the difference is the pastor is the one that's, preaching away and trying to hold a standard, trying to articulate a standard to people. And so when they don't live that standard, that messes up a whole lot of things, and it's very, very understandable. So that's where I would start, is just let people puke it all out, because I get it and I understand, because I have been there.
I love that because I think what everybody expects you to say at a moment like that is, well, because we stand on the word of God and Jesus, and it doesn't matter about what a man says, it matters what God says. But that's not what you did. You said, no, validate what they're saying.
Yeah, and I think one of the points I made in the message then was, well, that's because I've heard that as the thing. Well, we don't look at man. Well, here's the problem with that argument. It's true on one hand, but it's not true on the other, because Jesus was the one who handed his ministry to people. He had his apostles, and then he told them to make disciples of those, and passed it on. The message comes through people. It really does. And so we do look at man. We can't help it. There's no avoiding it. None of us has a true audience just with God in the purest sense. We listen to teachers. We're told to do that. We're told by the Bible to make sure that we're connected, and we're listening to preachers and teachers and elders and authority figures and all that. So on one hand, yeah, I get what people are saying. Well, don't look at men. But on the other hand, I'm thinking, well, it's completely unavoidable. And it was Jesus' idea. He's the one that handed it. So we can't just kind of get an easy out, in my view, of just saying, well, it's all about Jesus ultimately anyway. Well, Jesus is calling these. He's called me, and if I let down people, hey, I've let them down, and I've hurt them.
Yeah, it's true, because that when we come out of, when you have someone who means a lot to you like that, like think about this. When I was a kid growing up, I happened to have really good parents that really did me right and raised me right and all those kind of. I think I'm okay now, and they raised me well and all those kind of things. And so I really feel like I won the lottery with my parents. And if I ever felt like, and so not everyone has this sort of an experience, and my heart goes out. I can't even fathom what it's like for some people with some situations. But in my situation, that my parents, I completely forgot what I was going to say about that.
You have great parents, and they did a great job. I think that's where you were going with it.
Oh, I know. So if I ever thought that,
so that's important.
Man, you saved me there. I appreciate that. But if I ever thought it's something that my parents did something, it was kind of okay for me to do it. Even though I knew about the Bible, and I knew about God, and I knew about Christianity, I knew all that stuff. If I knew that my dad had ever done it, it was kind of like, well, he did it and he's all right, and he loves Jesus and all that. So I can kind of get away with it too. And of course, that's the downside of having heroes, is they can let you down, and you can't think that way. Yeah. Your eyes still have to be on Jesus, but Paul even said things that sound like this. The reality is, hey, these people are in front of you. This is a community religion in a sense, that we rely on each other and help each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we all have people like that in our lives, whether it was a coach we were growing up with, or a teacher, or a parent, and it's supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be where I'm looking to you. I assume you know more. You're an authority in my life. You're someone who I can model myself after and should be able to relatively safely. And I need to know and keep in mind that, you're not perfect, but we all have people like that in my life. I have a whole list of people that I have been able to model after and watch them, and they've been reliable sources, a lot more than have fallen. So that is a part of the package. And so we can't just kind of throw that to the side and say it doesn't matter, because it absolutely matters. It matters a whole lot. I think that's why God was so angry with David, because David was such an example to so many for so long, but then he fell. And it's one of the things that I've learned, if I haven't learned anything else from church ministry especially, is that your sin is never solo. Your sin, and even if you're not the pastor, everybody's sin affects so many other things than they than they realize, and it has this this sort of domino effect that happens throughout the church. And I've dealt with a lot of those kinds of situations, and that's one of the things that grieves me so much. Before you really step out and do one of those things that's just really affects your reputation, you're not just talking about you. You're talking about your kids, you're talking about your spouse, you're talking about other people in the public, your reputation. Because I've watched this with non-pastors who are just respected as godly people. They're good, faithful people that have fallen. And the fallout is very, very significant and very hurtful.
David, I think about David, you're talking about, he's my favorite Bible character aside from Jesus, I think.
Yeah.
And,
absolutely.
you have to say Jesus, right? Jesus is my favorite.
You better believe it, yeah.
But David is just so awesome. And the story of David in his life is just so amazing. But you're right. After his sin, his notable sin with Bathsheba, it seems like he never had the sheen on his ministry that he once had. And when it came to his children, it seems that he lost a sense of moral authority. When, for those that know the story of what happened with his children, there are moments where we expect David to step in, but it's like something wasn't the same anymore. And so even in his own personal family, obviously it had corporate, large scale. That's really something. So where do we go next with this? Matt Chandler, I think that they said that they looked into this, they looked through everything, and they agreed that there was nothing. We have more eyeballs than just Matt saying that it wasn't sexual and not romantic.
Right, yeah, and that's what they did right. Even though I know that it's kind of crawling around online that there are a lot of people, understandably, because we just have gotten skeptical, that there's going to be more, but there may not be. And right now, at face value, he had a body of elders, and what they did right was, and that other places haven't all the time, is there's a larger group of people that are around him and have their eyes on this, and that includes his wife and the other spouse as well. I'd be really curious to know what she has to say about it, because that would reveal as much as anything. But where we go from here is to watch them deal with this. And I've been a part of boards. I've been on church boards and on other organization boards that have had to deal with these similar things, far worse situations. And I can tell you, it ain't fun, for one thing, and it's like trying to figure out which wire to cut that doesn't set off the bomb. That's kind of what it feels like when you're in that position and you're just trying to navigate something without hurting a lot of people, a lot of collateral damage.
Yeah. Well, and I look at this and I kind of think to myself, and maybe this is where we kind of get into the question of how should we function as believers when it comes to brothers and sisters in the body of Christ. For example, there's something in me that says, if I'm arranging for a woman apologist, let's say, to come on my show, as has happened, I may DM her. I may send a private message, just, hey, here's the link. Hey, what do you want to talk about? Those kind of things. And I don't feel any conviction. I don't think I'm doing anything really appropriate. Maybe I should be doing something else even there, like tag my wife in on that kind of thing or something. Maybe that's good. But if I were to have an ongoing series of conversations with a woman that I really enjoyed, and the conversations got casual. I don't mean casual in the sense that we're saying inappropriate things like people usually think of when you say the word inappropriate, but rather more like we're talking about TV shows, and maybe I say words like crap where I wouldn't normally. It gets kind of casual and in that sort of a sense. I think I would start to feel a little uneasy about the familiarity there.
Yeah, and rightly so. The best coaching, I think this brings up a couple of things. The best coaching I ever received were for older guys that I worked with, that when I was coming up in a church and it was a fellow pastor, they quoted the passage that says, if you think you're standing firm, be careful that you do not fall. And that rings in my ears. They used to say it all the time because they experience the same thing. They watch a lot of people fall. And they said it was due to the fact that oftentimes when you're just walking the walk and you're doing the thing, you don't think you would. It's hard to envision. I would never do that. If you think that, you're in danger. Instead, assume you can. Assume you're just as capable as David or Matt Chandler or Ravi Zacharias or whoever. You're just as vulnerable, and that way you will be vigilant to watch how you're living your life, and you will set up barriers against that. Even if I call them, with our staff, we call them the stupid rules, because on one hand, they sound stupid and they feel stupid, especially when you think, I would never do anything like that. Well, make it where it's almost impossible in your life you could. That's why my wife and we had the rule called veto power. Veto power is she can look at any relationship in my life with another woman and say, that one makes me uncomfortable. veto. They're gone. It doesn't matter. I mean, they're out. Sorry, we say that. She can look at my phone.
Wait a minute. What does that mean? What does that mean? They're out.
They're out. They're cut off. Now, I've never had to do it.
You mean like you can't talk to this person anymore?
You're not going to be talking to her anymore. She's out of your life. She's gone. She's done. She's burned to the ground, man. It's
wow. Okay.
Take her out.
All right.
But I mean, yeah, but she has that power because if she gets uncomfortable with the relationship, because I've watched situations many times where wives were getting uncomfortable with relationships, but thought, well, it wouldn't be right for me to step in. I'm sure it's fine, and blah, blah, blah. And then sure enough, later on, there's this effect where before you know it, people have affairs. And because one of the main reasons people have affairs is because of proximity. They happen in the workplace all the time, and not just at churches. I've seen this happen. I can think of one business in our area where it felt like it was the affair factory. And the reason is because that when you are in a work environment, you're interested in the same things, you're vital, you're dressed right, you smell right, you're cleaned up, you're doing all these things, and you're with people in an environment that you're energetic and you like. And I heard one person say, who had an emotional affair one time, she said, what I realized is that the guy I had this emotional affair with, he was in my work. He was at a complete advantage against my husband. My husband, I had seen him in the middle of the night with a crying baby. I had seen him with puke on his shoulder. I'd seen him with his hair all messed up and his breath smelling bad and everything. I'd seen him in every way of life. When you're working with people, you're seeing them at their best. They're all dressed up and nice. So you have to guard against those things and set those things up. And so, the veto power thing, she can look at my phone anytime, anywhere, see what kind of conversation.
Do you have veto power too?
Probably not.
It's never come up as a problem.
It's never come as a problem. No, actually, technically, I do. It's a little hard to. But she's out in the workplace too, and so I do theoretically. So, but those kinds of rules get to the proximity thing because if you read David's story, it's very famously said that kings were away at war, his army was away at war, everybody was away. And this is the days before Netflix and YouTube. I mean, what did he have to do?
Stay on the roof,
kind of wandering around, and he had several wives. Maybe he was tired of them or whatever he was, and he was wandering. He didn't have anything to do. So literally, those kinds of things are one of the main reasons people get involved in that. So I say all that to say, oftentimes what you'll find is the guard gets let down, and that's what happened to Matt Chandler. And I think they stepped in. What they probably did, if what they're saying is true, and there's not another shoe to drop, I think what happened is they really did a good job, in my opinion, of heading something off at the pass that could have gone somewhere else. If they were being a little overly familiar, and inappropriate usually can at least snowball into something else.
Well, let's say it. Do you think that's probably what's going on here?
That
it is what it appears to be. Yeah.
I'm going to go with that now. But listen, I've been through so much of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm holding my skepticism.
Right.
So I'm not going to be blown out of the water if
right.
something else, if another shoe does drop. I'm not going to be, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Mm-hmm. I'll be like, okay. Because I have developed a kind of, every now and then with my staff, I'll say, no, I don't trust you. But that's why the stupid rules. I don't trust that you're going to do that. I don't trust me.
You don't trust me. Yeah,
I
that's
don't
what I was
trust
gonna say.
anybody when it
trust
comes
me.
to this because I've seen too many. Some of my best friends, mentors, too many go down that path. So do things that offset it. So I'm going to go with the best case scenario now. I would buy it because he said some things I think were interesting. Number one, he talked about his wife knew about it. Number two, her husband, and finally, that the elders read through it and what they said. It's a little hard to imagine, even as popular as he is and as famous as he is, that a group of guys would all look at content on a text, and if there was truly sexual stuff on there, they wouldn't say it. I would be shocked
because they're attaching their names to this.
You better believe it. Yeah. And no one knows their names. And so they, I can't imagine them doing that. And having been on boards where there's been serious accusations leveled and all that, for the most part, you don't do that. Is been my experience anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Is there anything else you think we should note about this?
I think what I would say is, as you're processing what's happening with pastors, there's a couple things I think are worth pointing out. Not to give excuses. I don't excuse any of this stuff. But people wonder, okay, what is it with pastors? Why do they keep falling? One, you're going to read about them before you read about the local store manager, just because of the nature of their thing. But there is a unique thing that I think happens in pastors' lives that doesn't happen in the average person's life, and that's spiritual vulnerability. We talk a lot about abuse of power, things like that. Spiritual vulnerability, what I mean by that is, and I noticed this early on in my pastoral career, women would show up and say, my husband's a jerk. They start running their husband in the ground because they don't come to talk to me about their marriage unless it's bad. And they list off all the reasons he's bad. And then you can tell that you're kind of the model good. He's not like you. He's not even in church. He didn't believe the Bible. He didn't do any of these things. They can get to the point where they're viewing their husband as the ultimate negative, and they can easily put you in the place of the ultimate positive, or what they're comparing to. And I was warned about that early. I was like, whoa, that really does happen. And it can make women very vulnerable, and it can also make pastors very vulnerable because he can step in and be the hero.
Do you think it can happen to unattractive pastors? I think it probably can. I think it
happens to people who are viewed as trustworthy, solid, respectable people. Yeah. When they perceive themselves as being married to someone who's not being those things at all. A lot of times they are. I remember I've talked to women who are physically abused and stuff. And what happens is that vulnerability is there, and pastors could be lured into getting too involved. I have a rule. I just don't get that involved. I'll listen to you a couple times, but I'll try to send you somewhere else. Because if you get too involved in the situation, that's where the emotions can kick in.
Well, I think the reason I say that, do you think it can happen to unattractive pastors?
I didn't know if you were joking or what.
I was joking, but as I think about it, it's actually an important thing, because I grew up kind of the doughy kid that never thought a girl was interested. Right. And I think pastors could feel that way, especially some of the pastors I've known who aren't that attractive. They might think nobody would ever. It's inconceivable. No.
There you go.
You
awesome.
need to be in the pastor's GQ.
This is an interesting twist on this conversation.
It is a twist. Well, you were just on a thumbnail recently with Brad Pitt, so
I was. Yeah.
But and holding your own. But I think I have seen that in myself is the notion that I don't even notice that a woman might be flirting. My wife has to tell me she's flirting with you, because I find it inconceivable that anyone would flirt with me.
Oh yeah, I've had that before. Yeah.
And so a pastor, for sure, who has women in that situation, he might think when things are much more obviously flirting of some sort, or some sort of an advance, he might think, well, she's just being affectionate because I'm her pastor, right, or something like that.
Yeah, and I have seen that. I mean, my wife will have to say, I think she was kind of flirting with you. I'm like, what? Yeah. Do women do that? I mean, have you seen me? There's a little bit of, that can happen.
And I'll tell you that when I was pastoring, my wife did tell me certain women in our church, you can't hug them. She never vetoed anything, but she'd say, and I always did the side hug anyway. Yeah. But there were some people that just come in for the full on hug, and it ain't right.
It's true. That's
so, all right. Well, this has been awesome, Pastor Bret. I'll tell you, I admire you so much. And even just this past Sunday, Pastor Bret they could probably see this online, couldn't they? I don't know if they show the worship part.
I think it's online. It depends on what you, okay.
Yeah, Pastor Bret plays bass guitar with the band. We have like 3 or 10 bands or something at One Life, but the band that was playing on this past Sunday, you played with them the bass guitar. And I leaned over to my teenage daughter, and I was like, look at Pastor Bret, man, he's killing it, he's tearing it up. And you did, and then you preached an awesome message. People should go check it out. And actually the one from the week before was about worldview type stuff directly, like about apologetics type stuff, right?
Yeah, we did some of that, and we unfold that in pretty often. So.
Well, that's one of the things I love about it. Everybody here on this channel knows I'm a big U2 fan, and I also love apologetics. So when we first moved here, Pastor Bret was at a different church then, but he was leading the service at that other church, one of the services. And my wife went first, and she called me and she said, I think I found the church for us. And I said, why? What happened? She said, I went to this church, and she named the church, and she said they were playing beautiful day by U2 as you walked in, not as part of the worship, but as you come in, and that's my favorite band. And then she said Josh McDowell, I think, was speaking there that day.
Oh, that's right.
And so I was, so she's like, "This has got to be your child." I was like, "Can I join?"
Let's go. That's right.
Without ever attending.
Checked all the boxes. Yeah.
So, and then when I met you, like I've said this many times before, you're sick of hearing me saying it, but like the first time I heard Pastor Bret preach, I thought that's one of the greatest sermons I've ever heard. He'll never do better than that. And the next week it was better. And the next week it was better. The next week it was better. And I've always felt that way. And listen, I hope that people who don't have a pastor might look at your church, even though you're not living in Evansville, and say, I'm going to treat that like I'm going to listen to that pastor. Now, I'm not saying if you're a Christian and you should be in a local church, if you can be a part of one. I'm not saying don't do that. But if you're perhaps a skeptic, or you're on the fence, or you still don't know what to do after COVID, listen to our pastor. I think you're going to be impressed. Bret, any parting words?
Well, like I said, it's hard to follow that. But I do hope people will take advantage of that, because I know that's kind of how we dip our toe in the water in spiritual things is through YouTube and things like that. And that's why we want to be more sensitive to it and provide that through what we're doing. And we're hoping to do a little bit different formatted kinds of things, again, contextualized to YouTube. But when it comes to this whole thing, whether it's Matt Chandler or whatever happened to him, to Braxton's point, I do know of a whole lot of people that are the real deal. And I know people who have been the real deal and they fall. It doesn't mean they weren't the real deal. It just means they fell. And I've watched people be restored. I've watched people go off the rails. It does happen. There's reasons why it happens. But I can also promise you, behind the scenes, there are people who are working overtime to honor God and to honor people and love them. I've been in a lot of these situations. It really does. It really does happen that way, where there's sincere things going on, and that the faith itself can be stood on and try to be lived out. So I think that's very important.
All right. Well, you're gonna see more of Pastor Bret, even if you don't go to his YouTube channel, because I'm gonna shove him onto your screen one way or the other, because I think this is the pastor for skeptics. I believe he's the pastor for Christians, but he's definitely the pastor for skeptics as well, in my opinion. Listen, I'm glad that you showed up, and if you made it all the way to the end, that means that you get a gold star. But I can't give one to you because this is the internet. But what I can do is give you a whole bunch of free stuff: ebooks, seminary level courses. I think we've even got an original song from Jonathan Pritchett from back in the days that he was in a nu metal band that was a Christian nu metal band called Perseverance of the Saints. And you'll hear Dr. Pritchett rapping.
I did not know this.
on the track. I think we have that in there.
Band that has rapping. Wow.
Yeah.
Hey,
there's even a free audiobook download of my book Letters from Ignorantia, as well as a lot of my other books in ebook form. So listen, you check that out at patreon.com/Trinity Radio, and also check us out at Trinitysem.edu if you'd like to study from your home and earn a degree in something related to the sorts of things we talk about here. But listen, it's been a joy to have you, and we'll see you next time on Trinity Radio.